It was 3:17 in the morning when I found myself sitting in the half-dark, trembling so fiercely that I could hardly keep my hands still. The silence of the room pressed against me, yet inside my chest it was as if thunder had struck without warning. Moments earlier, Jesus had peeled back a veil I never imagined could be lifted, and what he revealed about the hours following the rapture unsettled me to the core. For years I thought I had understood, teaching and studying the scriptures with diligence, convinced I grasped what it meant when the trumpet sounds. But now, every assumption collapsed like brittle glass, and I sat there shaken, overwhelmed by a glimpse of what waits for those who never truly believed when the church is caught away. Wherever you find yourself listening, whether confident you'll be taken, fearful you'll be left, or not sure what you even believe, this message carries a weight that can split a heart open. Some will hear it and feel their souls flood with fresh assurance that God's justice is always mingled with mercy. Others will shudder awake, realizing that the millions who laugh at Jesus today may stand stunned tomorrow when he gathers his own and leaves a grieving, bewildered world behind. I must say this plainly. This isn't meant to terrify or sensationalize. It is about seeing what Jesus sees, feeling the grief he feels, and understanding his heart toward those who remain outside when the door of grace closes behind the bride. I realized something sobering that night. We preach much about the joy of escape and the glory of reunion, but we have neglected to face the ache of what non-believers endure in the wake of that moment. The rapture is not only a rescue, it is also a hinge in time, a sudden swing that throws the world into storm winds no one can calm. 8 weeks earlier, this began to stir when a message landed in my inbox. I could not ignore it. It came from a pastor named David, who had faithfully preached on the rapture for 20 years. His words burned with urgency. "Jonathan, I've always focused on who is taken, but lately my thoughts will not release me from the question of who isn't. What becomes of them the minute after?" The parable of the 10 virgins, Jesus' warnings to the churches, Paul's cry of urgency, it no longer feels like theory. If the wise go in and the door shuts, what falls on the rest? I read his note again and again. Here was a seasoned shepherd, once content with charts and timelines, now undone by faces, the neighbor, the coworker, the family member, people who had heard the gospel yet stayed unmoved. He confessed that he looked over his city and saw crowds treating Jesus as optional, confident in their own goodness, entertained to distraction, but empty of holiness. He asked, if the rapture happened today, what would crush them tomorrow? Would there be mercy? Would there be madness? His honesty struck me like lightning. He wasn't questioning grace. He was grappling with the warnings of Christ himself, that when restraint is lifted, deception spreads like wildfire and hearts harden in an instant. That was the moment I knew I couldn't rest on borrowed theories. I had to ask Jesus directly, not only about the ones he gathers, but about those left standing in driveways, scrolling through unanswered texts, collapsing in grief when they realize loved ones are gone. Would chaos consume them at once? Would mercy still reach? Would lines be drawn they could never cross again? These weren't theological puzzles anymore. They were questions charged with eternal consequence. As I prayed, I realized how urgent these questions truly are. They touch the very edge of human history, the first breath after the church is lifted. What Jesus showed me didn't inflate my pride or fill me with secret knowledge. It broke me. It crushed my assumptions. It wrapped my heart in compassion until I could no longer look casually at the strangers in grocery lines or the friends who laugh at faith over lunch. Each soul felt unbearably precious, and the thought of them stepping into that storm without Christ tore something inside me. And it wasn't only David. As I began to carry this burden, messages from all over the world found their way to me. Sarah wrote that her friends joke about the rapture, yet she keeps dreaming of empty houses. She asked, if it happened, would there be any hope for people like me, or would God turn away completely? Michael, a church leader, wrote about his brilliant brother who mocks his faith and feels certain he needs nothing from Jesus. He pleaded, if he wakes up and I'm gone, will deception swallow him whole, or is there still a chance? Jennifer, a young believer, confessed her fear for her parents who do not know Christ. Would they be abandoned to wrath? She asked. Or would God still reach for them? I read these messages with tears. They weren't arguments about doctrine. They were the cries of hearts. beating and breathing in real time, asking what awaits in the most desperate hour. Scripture describes that season with words like tribulation, deception, wrath, endurance, and witness. Words that are not academic, but survival alerts for the soul. I understood then that God was not nudging me to sharpen an eschatological chart. He was letting me feel his grief, his justice, and his persistent mercy. He wanted me to see through his eyes the scramble for answers, the rise of false saviors, the crushing pressure to conform, and yet the surprising streams of mercy that still flow in places no one expects. Even in judgment, his desire is that none should perish. Still, he will not force the proud to bow or the hardened to yield. So let this question pierce you. If Jesus returned tonight, what would unfold for the people you love most who have not believed? What headlines would explode? What voices would shape the narrative? What choices would press upon them before nightfall? This is not about proving who is right. It is about weeping with Jesus for those not ready. If you've ever postponed the conversation, whispering to yourself, "I'll tell them later," know this. Later is fragile. Later evaporates like vapor. In a moment, I will tell you what he showed me, how the absence of the church transforms the spiritual atmosphere, what chains are loosed, what deceptions rise, and where mercy still glimmers like a river in a desert. But first, I must speak to you, the skeptic, the complacent, the conflicted. If you've rolled your eyes at the subject, I understand. I once did too, until the Lord confronted me not with ideas, but with names and faces. The first sunrise after the rapture is not a thrill ride for Hollywood. It is a wound, a hollow silence that demands an answer from every living soul. Ask yourself plainly, if the trumpet sounded tonight, would you be taken into his presence, or would you wake to a world breaking under unbearable pressure? And if it would be the latter, will you choose to learn now what that day will demand of you? The love of Jesus compels me to tell you the truth. He longs to rescue even in the storm, but the storm is real, and its winds are near. Stay with me, because what I am about to share may break you as it broke me. Yet in that breaking, you will glimpse the mercy that still reaches into the darkest hour. It was a Tuesday night when the weight of those questions could no longer stay inside me. For weeks, I had read messages from people begging to know the fate of their unbelieving loved ones, and the ache of their words had gathered in my chest like a storm. That evening, I entered the quiet of my prayer room, a small space lined with letters, emails, scribbled notes, all crying out about mothers, sons, friends, spouses who might wake one morning to a world emptied of the faithful. Words that make my sacrifice seem small. His eyes filled with unshed tears. When they call themselves worthless, they are telling me my creation has no value. When they declare themselves unlovable, they are rejecting the very love that drove me to the cross. The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I realized he was speaking about every apology, every self-condemning phrase I had carried in my soul and heard echoed in others. And he wasn't finished. Every time one of my children whispers, "I'm just a nobody," he continued, they erase the truth that I chose them before time began. When they insist, "I don't matter," they contradict the blood I shed for them. Each word is not harmless. It strikes my heart like a blade. His face twisted with sorrow, as if he bore every self-hating word spoken across the world. I staggered beneath the truth, realizing that what we dismiss as insecurity or humility was, in his eyes, a wound deep enough to scar eternity. And even then, he said there was more. The garden dimmed around us, the air thick with grief. "The words that upset me most," he whispered, "aren't spoken in hatred. They come from ignorance of my love. They are born from forgetfulness, from children who no longer remember they are precious to me." Tears fell from my face as I trembled before him, realizing that the question I had feared to ask had opened a door into a reality far more personal, far more devastating than I ever imagined. Then he turned, gestured toward a bench by a stream that shimmered like liquid light, and spoke again. "Come," he said, "I will show you the 7 kinds of words that wound me most." And in that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. The garden around us seemed alive with a beauty that words could scarcely capture. Colors shimmered with a depth no artist could replicate. and every petal, every leaf seemed to hum with joy. Yet even in this breathtaking place, his sorrow lingered. Jesus walked beside me slowly, as though the weight of what he was about to share pressed down on his every step. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the air like a bell that could not be ignored. "The words that trouble me most," he said, "are not the ones you assume, not the curses spat in anger, not even the blasphemies born of rebellion. I understand the wound behind those. I see the pain that spills out in fury, but the words that strike deepest into my heart are the ones my own children use against themselves." He stopped and turned to me, and in his eyes I saw a grief so raw that I felt it in my own chest. When they say, "I'm worthless," they are denying the price I paid. When they insist, "I don't matter," they make my blood seem of no value. When they call themselves unlovable, they reject the very love that carried me to the cross. The truth pierced me. Every memory of believers apologizing for existing, for daring to come into God's presence came rushing back. Every message I had read, every phrase of unworthiness I had spoken myself, all of it crashed down in one wave of understanding. I began to tremble, realizing these words were not harmless murmurs of insecurity. They were wounds carved into the very heart of God. He gestured for us to keep walking, and the garden darkened just slightly, as though creation itself mourned with him. "Imagine," he said, "your own children apologizing every time they enter the room, insisting they are failures, believing your love is only pity. Imagine them shrinking back from your embrace because they think they are burdens. That is what I endure every day." His voice cracked, and I felt as though the world itself bent under the weight of his grief. I wanted to speak, to explain, to ask forgiveness, but no words came. My throat tightened, my eyes burned, and all I could do was listen. Jesus raised his hand, and I saw before him an invisible reel of every self-condemning word spoken across time, millions of voices whispering, "I'm not enough, I don't belong, God must be tired of me." His face twisted with anguish, not anger, but the kind of sorrow only love can carry. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable, until he spoke again. "The most painful words are not spoken in hatred toward me, they are spoken in ignorance of my love. They rise from hearts that have forgotten who they are, who they belong to, how precious they will always be." Tears blurred my vision. I thought of the countless times I had said those very things about myself, thinking it humility, when in truth it was heartbreak to him. His revelation struck like lightning. The words that wound him are not profanity or rebellion, but the quiet daggers of self-loathing we turn against ourselves. Then he asked me, his tone soft but unyielding, "Are you ready to hear them? The specific kinds of words that pierce my heart the most? Once you know, you will never be able to hear them the same again. And more importantly, you will carry the truth to others, so they may learn to speak words that bring joy instead of grief." He sat down on a clear bench beside a stream that sparkled like flowing crystal. Motioning for me to sit, he fixed his gaze on me with a tenderness that was almost unbearable. "First," he began, "are the words of worthlessness. Every time my children say, 'I'm nothing, I don't matter, I'm worthless,' they erase the meaning of my sacrifice. I did not die for worthless souls. I died because every single one is worth everything to me." His voice trembled, but it was filled with fierce conviction. When they believe they have no value, they are calling the cross a mistake, as if my love could ever be misjudged. The weight of that truth sank into me like iron. I thought of every moment someone had whispered those words, and I saw them differently now, not as sad confessions, but as grief pressed onto the heart of Christ himself. "Second," he continued, his hand brushing the air as though painting the truth across the heavens, "are the words of unworthiness and shame. When my children apologize for existing, for coming into my presence, for needing me, they treat my invitation as a burden. They imagine I grow weary of them, when the truth is I delight in every moment with them. Their presence is my joy, not my irritation." His eyes glistened as he gestured toward the stream, its waters dancing in delight. "I did not create them to be tolerated. I created them to walk with me." I swallowed hard, feeling as though each word was rewriting the way I had spoken to God my entire life. "Third," Jesus said, his voice now carrying both sorrow and urgency, "are the words of self-hatred. When my children call themselves ugly, failures, mistakes, they attack the very work of my hands. They insult the image of God they bear. What they dismiss as harmless self-criticism is, in truth, an assault on the beauty I placed in them. I sat in stunned silence, realizing I was watching the heart of God unveiled, not in anger, but in love so fierce that even our smallest words could pierce him. And I knew this was only the beginning of what he was about to reveal. Jesus' voice grew heavier as he continued, every word carrying both sorrow and truth that cut through me like a blade. The fourth kind of words, he said, are those of comparison and inadequacy. When my children look at others and declare, I'm not enough, I'll never measure up, they are not just diminishing themselves. They are accusing me of error. They are saying I made a mistake in shaping them, as though I should have created them as someone else entirely. He began to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, and his robe shimmered with light against the darkening hues of the garden. Each soul is a masterpiece, he continued, formed with intention, designed with a purpose. When they compare themselves unfavorably to another, it is like a painting complaining that the artist should have used different colors. It is a rejection of my deliberate design. The words struck me harder than I expected. I thought about how often we envy others, silently declaring our own insufficiency, and I realized each comparison wasn't just harmless insecurity. It was a refusal to see the beauty God had placed in us from the beginning. He stopped pacing and looked directly into me with eyes that burned like fire. The fifth kind of words are those of hopelessness and despair. When my children whisper, nothing will ever change, God has abandoned me, I'll never rise again, they are calling me a liar. They are denying my power, my faithfulness, my very nature. I am the God of hope, of resurrection, of endless new beginnings. When despair is spoken as truth, it slanders the character of the one who makes all things new. His voice carried a force that shook me, yet beneath it lay a heartbreak deeper than words. I could see it in his face, the pain of watching his children give up when he was standing with arms wide open, ready to lift them. Each hopeless declaration wasn't only despair, it was disbelief in his promise. Tears slid down my face as I realized how often I had done the same, quietly muttering hopeless phrases when storms closed in around me. Jesus knelt by the stream, the water rippling with a glow like liquid light. His reflection trembled as he whispered, "The sixth kind are the words of fear and anxiety spoken as if they are final truth. When my children declare, I can't handle this, I'm going to fail, something terrible is coming, they live as though I do not exist. They speak as though they are alone, abandoned, powerless. It wounds me because I never intended for them to face life without me. Fear was never meant to be their companion. Faith was. Peace was. Trust was." He reached out, and for a moment I felt his hands clasp mine. His grip was warm, strong, steady, and in his eyes I saw both anguish and compassion. "These words do not anger me," he said softly. "They break me because they reveal how much my children are suffering unnecessarily. They have chosen chains when I already broke them. They carry fear when I already offered peace. I long for them to remember they are not alone." The garden grew still, hushed as though heaven itself leaned closer to hear his next words. His voice dropped to a whisper, yet it thundered in my soul. And the seventh, the words that wound me most deeply of all, are the ones that minimize my sacrifice. When my children say, I cannot be forgiven, my sin is too great, I've gone too far, they are declaring my death insufficient. They are saying my blood does not cover, my love cannot reach, my grace has limits. That lie cuts into me more than any curse could, for it denies the very core of who I am. Tears streamed openly down his face, and in that moment, all of heaven seemed to weep with him. They put boundaries on the boundless. They call finite what I made infinite. They tell me my cross was not enough. His voice faltered, heavy with grief, and I felt as though my heart might break under the weight of it. I could not breathe. Every category, every word he had spoken, replayed in my mind like thunderclaps. Worthlessness, unworthiness, self-hatred, comparison, despair, fear, disbelief in his sacrifice. They weren't random complaints or harmless slips of the tongue. They were daggers that pierced the very heart of God. He stood slowly, wiping tears from his face, and turned to me again. "Do you see, Jonathan?" he asked, his voice trembling with love. "This is why these words hurt me more than anger, more than profanity, more than rebellion. Those rise from weakness, these rise from misunderstanding. They break my heart because they reveal my children have not yet understood how deeply, how unshakably, how eternally they are loved." The garden around us shimmered faintly, as though creation itself longed for us to believe his words. I stood there, unable to speak, my soul undone by the enormity of what he had revealed. I knew my life would never be the same. I knew my words could never be careless again. And I sensed he was preparing to show me not only the grief, but the joy. What happens when his children finally speak words that echo his truth instead of their despair? The moment hung between us like a silence that carried eternity inside it. I felt the garden breathe, as if every flower and every blade of grass leaned in to listen to what he would reveal next. After unveiling the 7 kinds of words that pierced his heart, Jesus' countenance shifted. The sorrow remained, but a brightness began to rise through it, like dawn breaking after the longest night. His tears had not yet dried, yet his voice carried a new strength when he spoke. "Jonathan," he said, "now that you've seen what wounds me, I want you to see what delights me. For my children were never meant to live bound by lies. They were meant to live in the freedom of truth. The words that bring me joy are the ones that align with my heart. When my children speak truth, they are not just repeating words, they are echoing heaven itself." He lifted his gaze, and in an instant the garden came alive in ways I had never witnessed. The colors intensified, the air filled with music I couldn't quite place, and the stream leapt higher as if rejoicing. Creation itself seemed to respond to the joy he was describing. "When they say, 'I am loved,'" he continued, "they are agreeing with the eternal truth that was written into the universe the moment I chose the cross. When they whisper, 'I am chosen,' they are declaring what I knew before the foundation of the world. And when they say, 'I am worthy because of Jesus,' they are honoring the very sacrifice that proves their worth." His voice swelled like a song that made the earth tremble with beauty. He smiled, radiant now, and the garden responded, flowers opening wider, light streaming brighter, as though heaven itself was celebrating these words. "When my children declare, 'I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me,' they are not boasting, they are recognizing my power alive in them. When they say, 'I am fearfully and wonderfully made,' they are celebrating my craftsmanship. These words make my heart sing." His joy was contagious. For the first time since entering the vision, I felt a rush of hope, a rising conviction that perhaps we had been blind for too long to the power of our speech. The sorrow of earlier moments gave way to the breathtaking truth that our words could shift not only our hearts, but the heart of heaven itself. Then he leaned closer, his eyes blazing with love. "Words of gratitude instead of apology delight me. When my children stop saying, 'I'm sorry for bothering you,' and instead say, 'Thank you for wanting to be with me,' they are stepping into the truth of who I am. When they trade, 'I don't deserve your love, for I'm grateful for your love,' they are receiving the gift as it was meant to be received." I felt the weight of those exchanges, how simple the shift seemed, yet how profoundly it redefined the relationship. Gratitude instead of apology, confidence instead of shame, truth instead of lies. Jesus' tone deepened, his joy now fierce. Words of hope instead of despair fill me with delight. When they declare, "God is working everything for my good," they are trusting my character. When they proclaim, "My future is secure in Christ," they are standing on my promises. These words honor me because they believe me. The air thrummed as he spoke, and it felt as though the garden itself bowed in reverence to those words of hope. "Words of faith instead of fear," he pressed on, "reveal their trust in me. When they say, 'I can face this because Christ is with me,' they are living in the reality of my presence. When they declare, 'God will provide,' they are testifying to my faithfulness. These words tell me they know me as I truly am." The glow around him intensified, a radiance so overwhelming I could hardly look at him. "And words of identity rooted in my love bring me the greatest joy. When my children say, 'I am God's beloved child, I am chosen, I am redeemed, I am precious,' they are repeating my own heart back to me. They are confirming what I have always known, that they are mine, and they are treasured." My chest ached with awe. Each truth he named felt like a chain breaking, like light flooding into a place that had long been kept in shadow. I realized that this moment was more than instruction. It was revelation. He wasn't just telling me what words mattered. He was showing me the very heartbeat of heaven. "Do you see?" he asked, his face glowing with joy now. "The words that upset me come from children who don't know they're loved. But the words that delight me come from those who finally understand. These words are not about performance. They are about agreement. When my children align their lips with my truth, they step into freedom." The weight of his message pressed deeply into my spirit, and I knew it was meant not only for me, but for millions. He was showing me that every apology, every declaration of shame could be rewritten into gratitude, hope, faith, and love. I nodded slowly, unable to hold back tears. "Lord," I whispered, "I want to speak those words. I want to live them, breathe them, and teach others to do the same." His smile widened, and it was like watching the sunrise ignite the world. "That is why I called you here," he said. "Not to condemn, but to set free. Not to burden, but to release joy. Tell my children that their words matter because their words reveal their hearts. Show them that when they speak truth, they don't just change themselves. They bring joy to the heart of God." The suspense in the air shifted then, as though something even greater was approaching. I could feel it in the trembling of the earth beneath my feet, in the way the garden seemed to lean toward the moment. He was preparing to show me something deeper still, something that would break me and remake me all at once. Back in my bedroom, I opened my eyes to a blur of tears, my heart still echoing with his last words. It was as if the walls themselves pulsed with the weight of what I had just seen, a reality so vivid and intimate that no dream could compare. The air felt different, thicker, charged with a quiet electricity, like the moment after thunder has rolled away, but before the sky clears. I sat up slowly, trembling, my mind replaying the images of Jesus' face, his grief at every self-hating word, his joy at every truth spoken back to him. That vision had not only shown me God's heart, it had changed mine. Since that night, everything has shifted. My prayers sound different. My inner dialogue is different. Even the way I address others has begun to change without me forcing it. I catch myself now when I start to mutter, "I'm sorry for bothering you, Lord." And instead I whisper, "Thank you for wanting me here." I notice when I start to say, "I don't deserve this," and I replace it with, "I'm grateful for your grace." Each time, it's like a door swings open inside me, and I feel his presence rush in, not as an obligation, but as joy. It isn't self-help or positive thinking, it's agreement. It's aligning my words with the truth he's been speaking all along, and the more I speak those truths, the more my heart feels steady, anchored, and free. It's not pride, it's accuracy. It's seeing myself the way he already sees me. During filming yesterday, this transformation spilled into my work. I found myself talking to the cast and crew differently. Instead of apologizing for offering an idea, I simply said, "I believe this could work," or "I think we should try it this way." Instead of shrinking back, I expressed gratitude for collaboration. People noticed. They told me my presence felt different, calmer, more confident, but also softer. I realized then that confidence born from God's love doesn't look like arrogance. It looks like peace. And I began to dream of what this could mean beyond me. Imagine churches where people speak about themselves the way God speaks about them. Picture families where children grow up hearing words of identity and worth instead of comparison and criticism. Envision a generation who, from their earliest prayers, say thank you instead of "I'm sorry I'm bothering you." The ripple effect of that shift could transform entire cultures. This is why I'm sharing this story, not to make anyone feel ashamed, but to invite you into the freedom I've begun to taste. God's heart isn't hardened toward you because of how you've spoken. It's broken for you because he wants you to know how beloved you are. This isn't condemnation, it's an invitation. Your words can change, and when they do, everything else begins to change too. So if you're reading this and recognizing yourself in the words that upset God's heart, pause with me, take a breath. This is your moment. You are not too far gone. You are not unworthy. You are not forgotten. You are his. And the way you speak to yourself can begin to mirror that truth right now. Let me pray for you as I prayed for myself that night. Father God, I lift up every person reading these words. I ask that your spirit would whisper to them how precious they are, how much their words matter to you, how deeply you delight in them. For every soul that has been saying, "I'm worthless," let them begin to say, "I am treasured." For every heart that has whispered, "I'm a nobody," let them speak, "I am chosen." For every mind that has muttered, "I don't matter," Fill their mouth with, I am precious to God. Let every lie be replaced with your truth. For those who've been apologizing for bothering you, teach them to thank you instead. Show them that their presence brings you joy, not irritation. For those trapped in comparison, remind them you don't make mistakes. Help them celebrate their unique design and declare, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, instead of, I'm not enough. For those lost in despair, flood them with supernatural hope. Replace their nothing will ever change with God is working all things for my good. Lord Jesus, thank you for revealing your heart about our words. Help us remember we're not changing our speech to dodge your anger, but to bring you joy. Teach us to speak about ourselves the way you speak about us, with love, hope, and truth. May our words honor your sacrifice, celebrate your love, and reflect our true identity as your beloved children. Transform our hearts, transform our words, and through both transform our lives. In your precious name, amen. If this message has touched you, I invite you to stay connected, subscribe, share your story in the comments, and let this truth ripple outward. You are loved more than you know. Your words matter more than you realize. And one day, when you stand in his presence, you will see the joy your smallest truths brought to his heart.